Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of Money in Medicine. I'm Werner Hatting, and with me in studios today is Stefan Botma. We are the co-founders of Money in Medicine, and today we're going to discuss a very important topic. We're going to discuss COVID claims, and we're going to answer some questions of whether you can claim for COVID and how does one go about to claim for COVID on your current policy.
This episode of Money in Medicine is proudly sponsored by the PPS Health Professions Indemnity. For more information on PPS, please do go on our website.
Stefan, one of the questions that we get asked quite a lot, and especially during the past 2 years, was, can I claim for COVID?
Yeah, so Vanna, the quick answer is yes, you can. And that's why you do have income protection. Most of the big providers that we work with, the likes of BPA, Sanlam, Discovery, most of those companies were very open for helping their members in claiming. I think there was just a couple of issues with regards to waiting periods, cover amounts, when can you claim, if you're asymptomatic or not asymptomatic, you're showing symptoms, you were a person under investigation, there's been some changes with that. So there's a lot of uncertainty that bred during this over the last 2-3 years since COVID broke out. So hence I think it is important to say yes, but when will it cover? So hence we did this episode, and I'm glad we're talking about that today.
And that's a very important but that you mentioned. We actually have to put an emphasis on that but, because it's not all products that's going to allow you to claim.
100%.
And this episode will specifically focus on the requirements that your product needs to meet to be able to validate a claim. We also get asked the question of, can I claim for COVID from my income protection policy, and would it pay out regardless if I'm still getting paid by the government or by my employer? I think there's no short answer to that, but if you have to sum that up, Stefan, what was your experience the past 2 years?
Yeah, so again, it's important to understand whether you've got, and this might not sound a bit technical, but your income protection, whether it covers loss of income or whether it covers you for being booked off. If it's a traditional income protection and it covers loss of income, it will only pay out if there's no income. In other words, if you're on sick leave, you've got a secondary income, a form of an income, let's say you've got locums working in your practice and there's still a form of income, there's no loss of income. So then you won't be able to claim if it's a traditional income protector. But then if it has a sickness benefit, or if it has a benefit that will pay out irrespective of a secondary form of income, like sick leave, or you have an income through your practice because there's still locums working for you, you will definitely be able to claim. Because they don't look at loss of income, they look at your inability to perform your usual professional duties.
100%. So certain products would require of you to prove loss of income, if that's a requirement of the product. Correct. You would have to show them how much income did you lose out during that period.
Correct.
And that would need to be submitted to validate a claim. Whereas other products, you would need to show that you had the inability to perform your daily occupational duties.
100%.
Then how long, for what period does these policies normally pay out? Because that's also something going back to that but that we've mentioned.
Yes.
There's certain requirements that you have to meet to make sure that you're getting paid out the correct amount.
You know what, and I think, Vanna, there's the issue that I sometimes have is when we do a review with the client, and you start talking, you pick up that this client had COVID, but he was asymptomatic. So he had no issues. The client was booked off for, let's say, 10 days. He had to go in quarantine for 10 or 14 days. And the client thought he couldn't claim because he wasn't one of those cases where he had COVID and he was, hospitalized and he was on a ventilator and it was like severe. So he thought it's only in those cases where one could claim, hence he never submitted a claim. First of all, you have to look at the waiting period. Okay, so if you meet the waiting period, irrespective of the severity, you would be able to claim. So if you're on the lowest waiting period available in South Africa is 7 days. So if you booked off for longer than 7 days, which in most COVID cases or in all COVID cases, it's always exceeding the 7 days, you would be able to submit a full claim. So you would be able to claim for the amount of time that you were booked off. So if it was 10 days, 14 days, that's 10 or 14 days of your cover amount. So if you covered for 100,000 Rand a month, 10 days of the month is roughly about a third of the month. That will be a 35,000 odd claim for that amount of time. If it was more severe, you were booked off for 2 months or 3 months, then obviously you would be paid 2 or 3 months of salary.
Because and the reason why they would pay out for that number of days is purely, again, because you didn't have the ability to go to work because of the quarantine period.
Correct. Also, just Vanna, to jump in there, if you're not on a 7-day waiting period, and let's say you're on a 30-day waiting period, 95% of 30-day, I think 100% of all 30-day waiting period products only pays from day 31 onwards, whereas most 7-day waiting periods back pay you from day 1 for the total amount of time that you were booked off. So let's say, for example, it's severe, you were on a ventilator, you were booked off, and you booked off for 2 months or 3 months. Just take note that they will not pay you for that first 30 days that you were booked off. They'll pay you for day 31 onwards for the 2 months.
And that's something very important that you've mentioned. The actual waiting period that we are talking about now is not the period that the policy needs to be in place since you took it out.
Very true.
The waiting period is the amount of time that you've been booked off from work, that you didn't attend to your usual occupational duties. So that's the waiting period that we talk about. And it's important that they should be calendar days as well, and not normally business days.
Yes.
Because medical professionals, as we know, they don't work on Monday to Friday, they work on weekends, and they work on public holidays as well. Another important but that we have to mention is, and that we get asked quite a lot, is clients reach out to us and say, listen, Werner, Stefan, I've tested positive for a second or third time, can I claim again? And it's important to mention again that yes, you can. Again, depending on the product that you've got available, there's no limitation. As we're sitting here today, there's currently no limitation on the amounts that you are able to, or that restricts you to be being able to get paid out.
Very true.
So you'll get paid out every time you test positive, provided that you stay at home and you're unable to work.
Yes. I know in the beginning of the pandemic, that has changed. There's also a lot of companies that's changed the way that they look at certain claims. Certain companies paid out if you were a person under investigation. I know that was limited to one. If, let's say, for example, you didn't test positive, but your wife tested positive, obviously you guys were in contact with one another, you were still a person under investigation, they would have paid you for the amount of time that you booked off. But I know most companies actually clamped down on that, and they've changed that regulation.
Then another very important thing that we have to, that I actually want to draw people's attention to is we've seen this. I've personally experienced it with some of my clients. Is a lot of the products actually have what they call a cooling off period since you take it out. So you shouldn't confuse that with a waiting period. A cooling off period is normally something like 14 days since the inception of the policy, where they don't allow you to claim for COVID if you test positive within that first 14 days.
Yes.
And I think that's purely to prevent anti-selection. And you can explain to the listeners a little bit more about that.
Of course. So obviously, let's say it's what we've seen is the COVID happened in waves. So what we've also seen is during these waves, people get sort of, edgy, and they get sort of like panicking, and then they start looking or re-looking at their insurance products, and they want to then start taking out products. Insurance companies also run a business, so they also want to avoid anti-selective behavior where people tend to take up a policy and then after the wave they then cancel the policy again. So what they did to protect their risk book as well is they introduced cooling off periods, or I guess you can also say a waiting period for the lack of a better word, but it's basically from inception. So from the day that the policy starts, 14 days after that or 10 days after that, it's something you'll have to confirm with your provider. You can't claim for that first 10 or 14 days on COVID. Only from day 14, if you diagnose day 15 as an example, then you would be able to claim for the amount of time, whatever that you've been booked off. So it's just that initial step, that initial 10, 14 days that you can't claim.
Correct, yeah. So I think for the listeners that's wondered whether you can claim for COVID and how you go about claiming for COVID, I think this episode is very valuable. To sum it up, first of all, make sure that you are on the right waiting period. It needs to be on a 7-day waiting period that pays you backdated from day one. You need to have a sickness benefit that actually does not require of you to prove loss of income, but protects your ability to work. And then very important, make sure that you are protected for the correct sum assured, that your income is protected correctly. Otherwise, you're not going to get the full payment.
100%. I think to close us off, typically, Vanna, maybe just share what are some of the documentation that you would need to claim. So I test positive, I reach out to my financial advisor. What do I need to claim?
So again, that's all dependent from service providers.
Yes.
So the different companies have different documents that you need to submit. But in most instances, all of them would require a positive PCR.
Yes.
They don't accept rapid tests. They need you to do a positive PCR test to confirm that you've tested positive. And then normally a member's declaration, giving them a little bit of background of when you tested positive, what was your symptoms, were you in contact with somebody that would go with positive, what's your work environment, what was the duration of the period that you've been booked off.
Yes.
So those are typically the questions that I'll ask of you to validate the claim. And then in a lot of instances nowadays, they will require a doctor's declaration from your just a normal GP where you can go to confirm that you've actually tested positive and that you've been booked off for that period. On submission of those three documents, you should qualify to get paid out if everything is legitimate.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that information. Listener, we hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did find value in the episode, please feel more than welcome to check out some of our other episodes on www.moneyandmedicine.co.za. You can also subscribe to our channel. You can hit the thumbs up. Give us some comments. We'd love to interact with you. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook, where we share more valuable information, specifically some PowerPoints that you can look out for. And until next time, plan the plan.